My name is George. I'm 80 years old. I live alone and I think a lot. I sit every day on my porch. I drink tea slowly. I watch the street quietly. Sometimes kids play outside. Sometimes birds sit nearby. Sometimes it's just silenced all around. And in that silence, I remember things. I remember my past. And I remember my mistakes. I wasn't always old. I wasn't always slow. I once had dreams. Big ones, too. I wanted to travel the world. I wanted to sing on stage. I wanted to ride a horse. But every time I dreamed, I said later. Not now. Maybe next year. Maybe one day. And that one day never came. It always moved forward. It always stayed out of reach. I had friends who took risks. They left town. They failed. They tried again. And they lived. I stayed behind. I worked in the same place. I took no chances. I stayed comfortable. Comfort feels safe. It feels warm. But sometimes it's a trap that holds you forever. I told myself I'm being smart, but now I wonder, was I being smart or just afraid? I had a girl I liked. Her name was Helen. She had bright eyes and a kind smile. She liked to dance. She liked music. She wanted to live in the city and write stories. She asked me once, "Come with me. Let's go. Let's try. Let's be free together." But I said no. I said I'm not ready. I said I need more time. I said maybe later. She waited for me. She stayed around, but not forever. She had her own dreams. One day she left. She didn't cry. She just said take care and walked away in silence. I stood at the door. I watched her leave. I said nothing. I just let her go. I told myself I did the right thing. But now I know. I just didn't have the courage. Years passed fast. I worked hard. I saved money. I followed the same routine every day. Wake up, eat, work, sleep, repeat day after day, month after month, year after year. I said I'll travel when I retire. I'll try new things when I'm older. I'll live later. But when later came, my knees were weak, my back hurt, and my world got smaller. Now I sit here watching the street, thinking of all the things I never did. I never swam in the ocean, never learned another language, never danced under the stars. I never wrote a book, never told my father I forgave him, never told my mother I was sorry. I never visited Paris, never learned to play guitar, never climbed a mountain or even a hill. I used to say there's time. I used to think I'm still young. I used to believe I had forever. But forever is just a word. Time is not endless, and moments don't wait for anyone. Now I see it clearly. The biggest mistake is not failing. It's not even trying. I didn't fail because I tried and lost. I failed because I never even stood up. I hear the wind now. Soft and slow, it moves the leaves. It touches my face gently. It reminds me of Helen's hair, of summer nights, of roads I never walked on. And sometimes I smile not because I'm happy, but because I finally understand what I missed. And I hope someone somewhere hears this voice and chooses to live before it's too late. One afternoon, as I sat quietly, I heard a small voice near the front steps. It was a young boy from next door, holding a ball, standing with wide, curious eyes. He waved at me gently, asked if I was okay, asked if I needed anything. I smiled and said I'm fine, asked his name, and invited him to sit beside me. He said his name was Alex. He liked dinosaurs, cartoons, and playing outside every day. He asked me why I always sit alone, why I don't walk or laugh or play. I chuckled a little, told him I used to be young too, just like him. He looked surprised, laughed loudly, and said I don't look like someone who ever played. I told him I used to run fast, climb trees, and eat candy in secret at night. He asked if I had a bike, if I ever built a tree house or made a fort. I smiled at his questions, shook my head slowly, and said no, I never did. He looked confused, asked why not, and I had no answer that made sense. I told him I always waited, always said not now, always said maybe one day. He frowned deeply, crossed his arms, and said that sounds like a very boring life. I laughed so hard I almost coughed and said, maybe you're right, maybe it was. He looked at me kindly and said, it's not too late. You're still here right now. Those words hit me deep, like sunlight in winter, like truth I had forgotten long ago. I sat in silence for a while, looked at the street, then looked at the sky. The clouds moved slowly. The wind was soft, and something inside me began to shift. I turned to him and said, maybe I can still try. Maybe I can do one thing. He smiled big, stood up fast, and said, let's make a plan. Let's start small today. He ran home, came back with chalk, and we drew shapes on the sidewalk together. We laughed when the wind blew dust. We talked about dragons, and he asked about my dreams. I told him I once wanted to sing, to travel, to write poems on train windows. He spoke. Then do it. Write one now. Sing something now. Don't wait. Don't freeze. I paused, looked at him, and realized I didn't need time. I just needed permission, and maybe I had waited for someone to remind me, to wake me, to shake my soul. Alex did that without knowing, with his simple words and his brave little heart. That evening, I picked up an old notebook, dusty and empty, waiting for a story. I opened it slowly, wrote my name, wrote today's date, and wrote one sentence. It said, I am alive. I'm still here. I can still begin again. And with that line, something opened inside me, like a door I forgot how to find. The next day, I sat outside again, not just to sit, but to write, to think. Alex came back with his bike, waved at me, and asked if I wrote something new. I read him a few lines, simple words, honest feelings, and he clapped like it was magic. I laughed out loud, felt warm in my chest, and thought maybe this is what living feels like. The next morning felt different. I woke up early, opened the window, and listened to the birds. The sun was soft, the breeze was kind, the street was quiet, and I just stood still. I made my tea slowly, looked at the old chair, but today I didn't sit right away. I took a notebook with me, a pen too, and I had no idea what I'd write. Alex showed up after school, holding snacks in one hand and paper in the other. He sat on the porch again, asked if I was ready, said he had more ideas today. I smiled at his energy, nodded slowly, and told him I'm ready for anything simple. He drew a map with crayons, a pretend adventure, and said we'll travel with our feet. We walked down the block, past the bakery, past the little bookshop, past my old barber. He asked if I ever went far from here, if I saw other cities or other places. I told him not really. I was always busy, always saving money, always waiting for someday. He looked up at me, shook his head, and said someday is the biggest trick we believe. I laughed and said, maybe he's right. Maybe I waited too long. Maybe I wasted too much. But he held my hand gently, said, maybe you have today. Maybe today is still enough. We bought juice from the corner store, sat on the bench near the park, and watched people move. There were families, old couples, kids with scooters, dogs chasing shadows, and I saw them all. Alex asked if I ever wrote a song, something funny or sweet, or even a little sad. I said no, but maybe I can try. Maybe my life still has some melody in it. So we wrote silly lyrics together. Lines about tea, about birds, about forgotten dreams. And we laughed when it made no sense, when rhymes didn't work, when the paper flew away. Back home, I looked at my garden, dry and small, but still alive in the corners. I got the hose, cleaned the pots, touched the soil, and felt something peaceful in that I planted small flowers. Not for beauty, but for a reason to come outside every morning. Alex watched me from the fence, said it looked nice, said it looked like hope growing. That night, I made soup, real soup, not canned, with vegetables and quiet music playing low. I ate slowly, wrote in my notebook, and described the taste like a poet discovering flavor. I wrote about walking again, about listening, about smiling without pretending, about my new days. And I wrote about Alex too, the boy with crayons, the boy who reminded me of life. The next week I visited the library, first time in years, walked slow through the quiet shelves. I borrowed a book about painting, a small novel, and a travel guide just for fun. The librarian asked if I was starting something new, and I said yes. Finally, yes. She smiled kindly, stamped my books, and said we're never too old to be curious again. I went home, opened the travel guide, and looked at a page about a small town by the sea. I thought maybe I could go there, maybe just for a day, maybe just once. I didn't plan much, just circled the name and folded the page with a soft smile. It wasn't about the place, really. It was about the idea, the choice, the chance to begin. That weekend, I bought a cheap camera, the kind kids use, plastic and colorful and small. Alex helped me test it. We took pictures of flowers, my shoes, and the neighbor's cat. He said every picture is a memory, even if it's boring, even if it's blurry or crooked. And he's right, because those little photos made me feel like I existed. Again in time. At night, I sat outside. No TV, no phone, just the stars, my tea, and quiet thoughts. I remembered Helen again. Her voice, her ideas, her bravery, and her soft goodbye. I whispered to the night, I hope you lived well. I hope you danced. I hope you smiled. And for the first time, I didn't feel regret, only I felt something like peace. The next morning, I woke up early. The sky was clear, the sun was soft, the air was cold. I dressed slowly, wore a scarf, packed my notebook, and stepped out without telling anyone anything. I walked to the bus stop, waited quietly, watched cars pass, and thought about nothing in particular. When the bus came, I got on, sat near the window, and smiled for no reason at all. I didn't know exactly where I was going. I didn't make a perfect plan. I just went forward. I passed streets I never noticed before, shops I never entered, faces I never paid attention to. There was a boy with a violin, a woman painting on the sidewalk, a man feeding pigeons quietly. And I looked at all of them, really looked like I was seeing the world for the first time. I got off near the beach, a small place, quiet and open, with a long wooden bench nearby. I just sat down, took off my shoes, felt the sand under my feet, and breathed like a child again. The waves moved gently. The sky was endless, and I felt smaller, but also more alive than ever. I took out my notebook, wrote a few lines, then closed my eyes and just listened to the sea. A little girl walked by, pointed at my notebook, and asked if I was a writer or a grandpa. I laughed gently, said maybe both, and asked her if she liked stories or seashells more. She said both, handed me a tiny shell, and said it's lucky only old people get those. Her mom called her back. She waved and ran, and I stayed there, holding the shell like treasure. Later, I found a small cafe, sat near the window, ordered something new, and watched people again. I saw couples laughing, old friends talking, workers resting, and strangers living quietly around me. I didn't feel lonely anymore. I felt part of something, like a hidden piece in a big puzzle. The coffee was strong, the cake was sweet, and my eyes were soft with small tears I didn't hide. On the way home, I wrote a letter to my younger self, the boy who waited, feared, and stayed still. I told him I understand now. I forgive him. I love him. But I'm not him anymore. I said life doesn't wait. People don't wait. And the only way to live is to begin. Then I folded the letter, placed it inside my notebook, and promised to keep going from now on. That night, I shared dinner with Alex and his family. They laughed loudly, passed dishes, shared jokes. His mom asked how I was doing, and I said I feel more alive than I have in years. Alex showed me a drawing he made. It was me with wings flying over a big garden full of stars. I laughed so hard I almost cried, then thanked him for seeing me as someone who could fly again. I started keeping a journal for him. Simple pages, small thoughts. Short lessons I wish I knew earlier. I wrote about courage, about regret, about waiting too long, and the joy of starting anyway. I said, don't wait to say I love you. Don't wait to travel. Don't wait to try. Just go. I said the world is not kind to those who pause forever, but it opens to those who step forward. I donated my old things, gave away boxes, cleaned the attic, and made room for something new. I kept only memories, small photos, a few books, and the stories I wrote with my own hand. My room felt lighter, like breathing fresh air after years of dust, silence, and forgotten dreams. I stood in the middle, turned slowly, and smiled at the space I finally gave to life. Some evenings I speak at the library. I read my pages. I tell my story to young strangers. They listen in silence, eyes wide, hearts open, and I see parts of myself in all of them. I tell them about Helen, about fear, about wasting time, and about the boy next door. I say one day can change everything, but only if you let it. Only if you stop waiting. Alex visits every week. We write together. We draw silly maps. We invent impossible cities. He says he wants to be a pilot, a chef, a painter, a magician. And I say be all of them. He believes it's possible. And now, finally, so do I, because belief is something we learn again. He once said I'm his best friend, and I told him he's the reason I started living again. Now I wake up with purpose, small or big. It doesn't matter. I just want to feel each day. I walk slowly, eat slowly, talk slowly, and enjoy the silence between every breath I take. I don't fear the end anymore. I fear not living the days I still have left to hold. So I live them now, one at a time, one line at a time, one deep breath at a time. Now the days feel quiet, but not empty. Slow, but not wasted. Soft, but full of meaning. I wake up with purpose, even if the plan is just to sit, breathe, and write something small. I look out the window each morning, watch the birds, count the clouds, and smile gently. There's peace in these small things, a kind of joy I never noticed before, not when I was busy waiting. Alex still comes around more curious now, more talkative, and with bigger questions each week. He asks about love, about mistakes, about death, about how to know if life is lived well. I never pretend to know everything. I just answer with honesty, with feeling, with silence when needed. He listens closely, always watching my eyes like he's learning not just the words, but the pauses too. One day he asked me if he could go back. What would you do differently? What would you change? I sat for a while, thought about the question deeply, let it settle in my chest like a stone. Then I said softly, I wouldn't wait so much. I wouldn't hide my heart. I wouldn't play it so safe because time is faster than we think, and regret grows quietly like a shadow behind every goodbye. I told him to speak up, to say what he feels, to take chances even if they're scary. I told him to hug people tightly, to laugh loudly, to cry without shame, to try without fear. He nodded seriously like he understood and said he would try, even when it feels too big. That moment made me feel like my life, even with its delay, still had value, still had light. I began writing letters to strangers, short messages, folded pages left in parks and cafes. They said simple things like "you matter," "you were seen," "you were allowed to begin again." I left them on benches, inside books, on trees, near rivers, wherever someone might pause and find them. I imagined someone sad, picking up a note and smiling, even if just for 1 second. The neighbors greet me more now, not because I change how I look, but because I'm present. I ask about their kids, their work, their worries, and I listen with all my attention. Listening is a gift, one I never offered before because I was always stuck in my own head. Now I give it freely, and in return, I feel seen in ways I never knew were possible. I even visited a school once. Alex invited me, said I should tell my story to his class. At first, I said no, said I was too old, said they wouldn't care. But he insisted kindly. So I went, sat in front of small faces, nervous at first, then calm as I began to speak. I told them about waiting, about fear, about losing time, and about how one boy helped me find life again. Some of them asked questions, big ones, personal ones, and I answered with honesty and warmth. One girl cried, said she felt alone sometimes, said she didn't feel brave enough to start anything. I held her hand gently, said bravery doesn't mean no fear. It means moving forward, even with fear. And I told her she was already brave because she spoke her truth, even with tears in her voice. That night, I cried in bed, not from sadness, but from something quieter and fuller. It was peace. Finally, full peace. The kind that comes not from doing everything, but from trying anyway. I wasn't young anymore. I didn't have endless days, but I had now, and I was using it fully. And that meant more to me than any perfect life I imagined when I was too afraid to begin. I wrote a final letter in my notebook, not to myself, not to Alex, but to anyone who finds it. It said this life is short, but also wide, and it stretches for those who walk, not those who wait. It said your dreams matter. Your voice matters. Your time is now, not later, not someday, but now. It said I was silent for too long, but I am speaking now, and I hope you do too. In the last page, I wrote a poem. Something short, something honest, something that feels like goodbye. It said I was a man who waited, who paused, who feared, but who finally stood up and lived. It said, don't waste time counting years, count moments, count hugs, count the risks you dare to take. And it ended with these words, even late is better than never. Even slow is still moving forward. Now I sit with peace in my chest, with tea in my hand and sunshine on my face. The boy beside me plays with chalk, draws stars on the ground, and sings songs I don't know. And I laugh, I write, I breathe, and I thank life for letting me live at last, because I am not waiting anymore. I am not afraid anymore. I am simply beautifully here,